All right, guys, we got another treat here. It's just me this for this podcast. Matt's got some different things he's got to take care of tonight, but we have Leah Miller on. She's the president of Complete Sports Management, which was in charge of the Israel trip we just took with Auburn. And Leah, welcome.
So first up, it's Lee
Oh, is it Lee? Oh, sorry, I
Miller.
should have said
Yeah.
asked before we started
So
recording, but welcome, Lee Miller.
yeah, no worries. So thank you so much for having me on.
Well, part of the reason to have you on is I'm just so interested in this international basketball tournaments and these teams traveling around every 4 years. We've had a couple assistant coaches on that were talking about how important it is to the team, and we got televised this year. And I just kind of wanted to get maybe how you got into this industry and kind of describe your job in that industry.
Yeah, so I've been in the industry for 12 years. I got in, I'm the creator, founder of Battle for Atlantis, which is one of the biggest men's early season basketball tournaments and women's in college basketball. Auburn actually played in it this last year with the overnight epic, loss to UConn,
Oh
but was
man, yeah.
a classic. And Coach Pearl, I've known him since he was at Tennessee. Actually, I signed Tennessee back in 2013, actually, when Coach Pearl was supposed to be the original coach of that. So go way back in college basketball, and then in the foreign tour space, go back up till up into 2012, and really kind of started in the Bahamas and started with a couple of smaller Division I teams. And then in 2014, my first really big team was Kentucky, with it was kind of that Devin Booker, Willie Cauley Stein, Carl Anthony Towns undefeated team that went 30-0 until the postseason. And that was my first big time team. And then my first team outside of the Bahamas to do a foreign tour was Villanova, when Jay Wright won the 2017, actually 2016 national championship. And I kind of thought, why not do this all over the world? Because I travel the world, I do it at a high level. And so I've kind of made the rounds in college basketball. And when Coach Pearl wanted to do something in Israel that had never really been done before, he called me over a year ago and said, Lee, what about doing this in Israel? And I, of course, in the fashion that I am, said, yeah, let's do it. Most of the things that I do have never really been done before. And so kind of figured it out and had boots on the ground. And it wasn't easy. Doing business in Israel is not easy. Dealing with Israelis is not easy. It's a beautiful people, beautiful culture, but it's a very different culture. And so, it's a very, very short way of describing kind of what we did, what we've done, dealing with adversity, dealing with Auburn and, their athletic department, and then Israel. And, I brought him into Palestine, which was controversial. And I know, Israelis, whoever listens to this podcast, probably doesn't want to hear that, but we went into Palestine and it was unbelievable. And we went into a home and we had lunch, and Bruce is really the perfect coach and the perfect person to do this with, because everything I pitched, everything that I formed, everything that I wanted to do, he wanted to do. And so it was really the match made in heaven with, the inaugural college basketball event there in Israel, this time of year.
Yeah, we love Bruce on this podcast, and I think you're getting some of the vibes that we've gotten through. I guess he's been at Auburn for 8 years or so now. He just gets it. He just gets what's great about college basketball. He gets what the players are going to love. He gets what the fans are interested in. I mean, to have 3 games on the SEC network after a great year that we had this last year, after doing the Battle for Atlantis, like you said, and then we have the Israel. The fans are just so excited to have those games there. And I wanted to get a little bit to you. Said you started with the Battle for Atlantis in the Bahamas. I think I was looking at your LinkedIn. Now we're LinkedIn buddies, but I saw you were like in finance, different things at Morgan Stanley, different places, and then you were at IMG Sports. Like, how did you make that jump from, I think we all kind of have our day jobs, and you've made this jump into this like incredible world of the Bahamas Bowl and Battle for Atlantis. Like, how do you even get into something like that?
It was an interesting jump, but also one that made total sense. I started on Wall Street, worked at and moved graduated from Georgia Tech. I was a full scholarship tennis player, moved to New York City, worked on Wall Street, but the acumen of business with sport, worked at IMG, left there to start Battle for Atlantis, grew up in the South, created, the only college football bowl game outside the US. Like it kind of just piecemealed and made sense. And it was, one thing after the next, and just building relationships, doing things the right way, understanding it's going to take a long time. That's sort of how we created, what we did with complete sports management. And just, Battle for Atlantis was really the thing that took off the most. I mean, teams that have won that, go on to win national championships. We had our inaugural women's event last year, had a South Carolina UConn final. South Carolina went on to win the national championship against UConn in the women's final. It's just really been serendipitous and
And
humbling.
I wish it was us. We got up to number one. We looked like we were on our way. It looked like the Battle for Atlantis. We've talked to the coaches and a couple different former players that talk about these international trips and how much they mean to them and how much bonding is involved. And win or lose, there's a certain kind of like this traveling to these interesting places and doing the extracurricular activities seem to really put something together. These teams. We had Stephen Pearl come on and talk about maybe longer than 8 years ago, whenever he was at Tennessee, 2008, I guess, when he went on his international trip. I don't know if that was you guys that sent them to Italy with Bruce and Stephen Pearl's a player, how important that was for them. They went to the Elite Eight. Our Final Four team went to Italy and maybe one other place, and they went to the Final Four. This team goes number one after going Battle for Atlantis. I don't know if that's part of your pitch, but you might as well put that on the resume. These teams, they go on these international trips and they come back different. They come back better bonded.
Yeah, well, I mean, that wasn't my pitch. My pitch was Battle for Atlantis. So win our tournament, then win the national championship. Yeah. So it was different than, the foreign tours. But I mean, like both things are so important to the history and, just the schedule and what it does, and building a team early on and giving them practice and, letting really quickly how good or how much work or both you have to do, that season.
I wanted to get some history from you here. Part of this, I wanted to do my own research into this, and I was just super interested in all these games. And one, I saw an interesting fact was that the Bahamas Bowl was the first foreign bowl since the 1930s, and there was one in Cuba. So it's been, you really did revolutionize something there. But then on top of that, I wanted to hear, the history of just these international games. Like I was going up through the list there with, they're clearly going back in 2008. They were going to these games. We've gone 4 years ago or so. Kentucky's been on TV a couple times. I don't know, like through your eyes, what's the history of these teams sending teams out during the summer to get like international experience?
Yeah, I mean, so I did all those with Kentucky. So I ran all those since 2014. I'm the one who literally put all of Kentucky, the summer basketball. I did that for ESPN/SEC network. So I go way back to 2014. The history is it good content, and is it willing ESPN? Are they willing to pay for it? And if they are, they're going to do it. This summer I pitched it to ESPN. I pitched it to Jay Billis, a dear friend. I pitched it to the whole thing. Is this something where, it's going to revolutionize college basketball? It's worth your content. It's worth you spending the money, because it's a dead time in college basketball, but you're going to have to spend a couple of bucks. And they figured that it would be. And so ESPN invested into it. So, I mean, I go back 8 years in summer basketball, and at the forefront of all of it being on television globally, domestically, digitally, all of it streaming. And so it just comes down to content. Does ESPN want the content? And is it worth it? Is it a good story? and Auburn being in Israel was a great story, dealing with, I mean, literally Bruce and I don't care who you talk to. You can talk to all the Israelis. You can talk to anyone at ESPN. You can talk to anyone in college basketball. Bruce and I curated single-handedly the entire thing from soup to nuts. We went through, what do we want to do? I pitched him, boom, 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 boom. Okay, so let's change this. Let's do this. Let's go here. I mean, we literally, what's good for college basketball? What's good for the team? What's good for the fans? And literally curated the entire thing. People came in, people donated money, people want to say they were involved. No one else was involved. It was Bruce and myself. We literally did the entire thing. And so it was understanding that he worked for ESPN. No one understands what they want on TV better than Bruce. I created Battle for Atlantis. No, I understand content. I understand the business. And so combining our two minds, understanding budget, understanding what this whole thing meant, it was genuinely an unbelievable marriage of business acumen, sports, coaching, the whole thing. It was just it was really a beautiful and brilliant thing that was meant to be, to bring Israel to the forefront on something we think and we hope, will go on to last with other teams.
Yeah, I love these international games. I think they're so great for the sport, and probably, I'm still trying to get a grasp on the history. Looking back through Google or wherever else, asking other fans, it really feels like it started in like the early 2000s or mid 2000s. The Kentucky stuff, all the things you've done are really like where people underline it. They said, I think they mentioned on one of the broadcasts that Duke might have played in Israel at one point. There seems to be kind of a trajectory right now of like these games being more successful, more interest, more
Duke didn't play in
frequency.
Israel. Duke played in Dubai and China, and then they played in Canada. There's a
Uh-huh.
huge difference. And the forefront of this, like international games, international football, a foreign tour is very different than an MTE, which is a multiple team event. A multiple team event, I changed a piece of legislation so that the Bahamas could be added into what's called an exempt bylaw. It's a super long story, but because the bylaw was changed, that's when we first formed Battle for Atlantis, which opened up the Bahamas, which in turn opened up the Caribbean to have multiple team events. When Duke went to Canada, they went because they had RJ Barrett, whose dad was on the Canadian. He ran the Canadian national team. RJ was he was the purpose behind Duke going to Canada back in 2000. It was a couple of years ago. It was when RJ was going into his freshman year. But the foreign tour is a totally different animal than the multiple team event, which is a totally different animal than college football. The Bahamas Bowl was the first, the Bacardi Bowl was in the 40s in Cuba. That was a kind of a one-off game. They called it a bowl game in Cuba. This has been since then. It's the longest running international game in the history of college football. So we're going in our 8th year of the football. So your question, it's a little bit there's so many different silos, if you will, of kind of what you're asking with college football, MTEs, and then international foreign tours.
It feels like I'm coming in a bit on a narrative of, they put this rule in a couple years back. This every 4 years you can take your basketball team abroad, and clearly they put that in for some sort of incentive of, hey, we can't have teams going every year. Maybe it's a recruiting incentive, so let's regulate this at 4. But I'm before that rule. The idea of these international games, I don't quite know what the narrative was of who was going, why were they going, and I don't know if that 4-year rule now.
International games are different. So once every year, you can go and play a foreign tour. Once every year, you can go and play a regular season international game. Once every 4 years, you can go and play the same MTE every year. So technically, in 1 year, you could take a foreign tour. You could play an international regular season game, and you could play an MTE in an international country. So they're totally separate bylaws in everything. So, and people, the only reason I know that is because I've been heavily involved, but a lot of people don't understand that. So Auburn could technically go play a regular season game in Israel. They could go take a foreign tour in Israel, and then they could go play Battle for Atlantis in the Bahamas the same year.
So, but they couldn't do what we just did in Israel. They have to do it every 4 years. So teams like
Yes.
Auburn this year, Kentucky, Alabama, I believe I saw many others going around. I just wonder, from your opinion, this is your industry. I think it was a great success to see this Israel team and how much fun that was. I think Kentucky being on TV is great. You're seeing more teams be interested in this stuff. You're seeing more fans looking at the scores, trying to get access to this. But there's only, what, 2 teams this year on TV. How do you see like the future of that? Do you see them undoing that 4-year rule? Do you feel like that 4-year rule is in place for a good reason? I would personally love to see more,
Well, I mean, it comes down to money and content. I mean, I did Alabama's foreign tour. I took them to Barcelona and Paris. In Paris, they played the Chinese national team. They played a pro team from Lithuania. I did the whole thing. It comes down to money. So it wasn't about doing it once every 4 years. It comes down to content and what is ESPN willing to pay? What's a sponsor willing to pay? So, it comes down to how much money teams have, and they're trying to equalize the haves and the have-nots. But the television part isn't even that. It's what kind of content are they willing to pay for? Is the school willing to pay and package it and send it to ESPN, Fox, NBC, who a linear provider, a digital content provider? It depends on the school and whether or not whoever the provider is willing to spend that kind of money. We did 14 foreign tours all over the world. I just got home from Cairo with the NBA. Right before that, I was with Michigan and Mykonos. We played a game literally against a pro team in Mykonos. It just comes down to, does the coach want it on TV? And if they do, is a provider willing to package and present it and pay for it to be on TV? So even teams who, maybe ESPN would want that content, maybe the coach doesn't want it. They have 8 new freshmen. We did Ohio State. I brought in the Egyptian men's national team. We brought in a pro team through Carlos Arroyo from Puerto Rico to play Ohio State. Ohio State won each game by 3 and 4 points. They didn't want it on any kind of TV. So just because it's not doesn't mean ESPN or whoever doesn't want it. It means the coach maybe doesn't want it. They're coming up with new schemes, new forms, new players, new positions, new rotations. Like there's so much behind it that people don't know.
But what do you see as the future with it? Are you pushing for more of these, do you think? Or are coaches pushing? Where do you see maybe another 10 years? I really feel like there's a lot, maybe it's just because our own fan base got to enjoy it, but do you see this as maybe something that's going to grow?
It's growing every year. It's growing every year. Look, college athletics is growing every day. Are we going to have a Super 5? Are we going to have? Is the NCAA going to exist? Is college football? I work with the Football Bowl Association. To say what's going to happen. Pull out a crystal ball and whatever you come up with, like, congratulations. Like, no one knows. It's just it's an industry that is being driven by NIL. It's being driven by the Power 5. It's being driven by so many factors that no one can even begin to understand.
Oh man, we feel it on the fan end, and we think we got it tough on the fan end. You're actually in the industry. This is your work. You're having to deal with all this insanity. But I don't envy that. But I wanted to ask about how you got together with Bruce. We had the Battle for Atlantis, which was your baby. Was this Israel tournament or this Israel trip? Did you talk about that at the Battle for Atlantis? Was that already in the works beforehand? Tell me some of that origin story.
So I asked him to be in Battle for Atlantis way before we spoke about Israel, way before that was on the table. And I think just, coach understanding who we are, what we do, the level we do it, the teams we work with. It was just sort of like, okay, can you help us if we wanted to do Israel, could we do it? How would we do it? What would we do? And it was just sort of, you know, an experiment. It was just something that had never been done before. Israel had never brought a Power Five team over. It's expensive. They do things in a very particular way. It's just a different place to do business. And every time you start something new, which is what we do, whether it's college basketball, college football, there's always a learning curve. And so Bruce was like, well, who understands learning curves and understands frustration and how to work with people and dealing with something new. And so when Bruce asked me to kind of get involved and really run and start the whole thing, I told him, yeah, like we'll get involved. And it was just, a lesson of love and learning and partnership and, dealing. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. There's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacks. There's a lot of people who have a lot of information. No one understands it from the get-go. And Bruce and I were the ones who did it from the get-go. And that's what made it so special. And he's just such an unbelievable person, coach, mentor, and partner. And to be with him and, give him good and bad feedback. No, this is not going to work. Or what about this? He's so moldable. He's so transitional. He knows how to pivot. He knows how to work. He knows how to react. And, to get this off the ground, he was the perfect coach. But it's not only Bruce, it was his coaches and his players. Like they were all unbelievable. Like his players we did a lot of tours this summer. They were the most unbelievable kids we worked with. His staff was the best. I mean, they were all they knew how to roll. If you don't know how to roll in this, like it's gonna be a long journey. And so but coach put all those people together. And so it was just really an amazing learning experience, and one that, if it was someone different, I don't know if it would have happened.
You're speaking our language for sure. We're big Bruce components. We think he just gets it in college basketball, and when he's also a great evaluator, not of just the skill level, but clearly he finds these kids that also get it. That roll with the punches and enjoy the moment and know what they're getting out of this kind of stuff. Which is you don't always see it in certain age groups, the maturity level, like the understanding of how privileged they are to be able to enjoy this experience. But we saw them have some really cool experiences outside of basketball in Israel. We saw the Dead Sea. We saw them eating in Palestine with some Palestinians. We saw lots of other events. I wanted to know things that, one, what were your favorite events with this? And then two, what are some events maybe that you wanted to do that didn't work out or something you want to do in the future? I'm just curious, like kind of the background of planning these different events around Israel.
Yeah, I mean, when I went on the site visit there and I went into Palestine, it was controversial and it was not on the docket. And I called him and I said, look, the tour guide, if you want to see where Jesus was born, you got to go into Bethlehem, which is Palestinian territory. And also, the guy who's doing this, he's a Palestinian basketball coach. He knows who you are. Ironically, when I was in this guy's car in Palestine, he was recruiting a kid from UConn who played in Battle for Atlantis. Like, that's how small the world is. And so I said to him, you got to believe in me. We've got security. Let's do this. And Bruce did not even flinch. And so that's how Palestine came about. With the Dead Sea, it was just, we transitioned leaving Jerusalem into Tel Aviv. How do you not do that when you're in that part of the world? The kids were so great. The players loved it. We did the mud. We did the salt. We did the whole thing. It was hot as hell. It was over 100 degrees. The kids never complained. They wanted to embrace the entire thing, and they did. We saw the city of David. We saw the old city of David. We didn't miss anything. If we did anything, I would probably taper back as much as we did and give the kids a little more free time. I mean, Bruce is just such enthusiastic Jewish coach. He wanted to share his faith and the history of his religion with his team, which was so pure. So there was nothing that we left off the docket that we, should have done. If anything, it would be, give the kids a little more freedom, into Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, let them experience. I mean, the people are very friendly. They're, especially Tel Aviv. It's a new city. It's a modern city. They use Shabbat, they turn off their phones, but they don't turn off their lives. They party, they get after it. Like, let the kids, you know, experience a little more, in Israel than they did. But, that said, I mean, it was a perfect trip. I don't know if there's any really thing that I would change with this group.
Yeah. You know what? One of the most interesting moments of the trip, we all hold our breath a little bit with the Israel stuff. There was some political conflict without getting too much in the details of all that. What was the logistics like when things were happening? I don't know for the audience. I'm sure you were all paying attention. There was some fighting and things that went on.
Yeah, Gaza was shooting bombs. They were shooting missiles into Tel Aviv. It's no secret. Yeah, it was crazy. We had, Israeli special forces security. This is their daily life. This is for us. It's like, oh my God, what's going on? For them, it's like, oh, it's another missile shooting into the water or the Iron Dome, which the United States funds, which the Israeli has the technology. If a missile's coming into Israel, it goes up and basically disintegrates and and gets rid of the missile through the Iron Dome. I mean, there were so many things that we learned that were just so unlike our daily life, but it was there was so many learning experiences. The whole thing was incredible. But that's part of being in that part of the world. Like you sign up for a different experience. Our security was unbelievable. We never even remotely felt in danger. I mean, it was just learning, here's what daily life is like to be an Israeli, to be a Jew this in this part of the world. It was incredible.
We joked on Twitter that the Auburn fan base was learning, becoming geopolitical experts just through having to watch their basketball team play.
For
But
sure.
I'm curious. We were keeping track of. At least I was refreshing at all times. I already have kind of a special interest in new stuff like that, anyways. But I saw that some large soccer teams, I think Juventus maybe, had canceled their game in Israel. We saw some other things get canceled, and I was kind of refreshing, like, oh man, I hope we don't get a notification this stuff gets canceled. Was there any kind of frantic conversations or any real? I don't know if you would be involved in those or not, but how close were we to not being able to see those games played?
I mean, it never really gained momentum. I don't know if those games were canceled when we were over there. Honestly, I didn't even follow it. We just followed our stuff. I don't want to start any propaganda. I mean, it was business as usual, and this is what's going on. If there was ever a time where the student athlete, the fan, whoever was going to be in danger, we would have done it. So, we had the best security in the world outside of the U.S. military. It's the Israeli, and so if they ever told us, you know what, it's not a good, it's not a good move to do this, we would never have done it.
And listen to more. We interviewed sports rabbis. So anybody that's listening, if you want to hear more about people canceling or what it's like every day, tune in the sports rabbi one last podcast. You talked about how great this trip was, and clearly, even with some hiccups, it didn't seem to impact you guys. What Bruce wants to do a yearly trip like this now. Now the team can't do it every 4 years because of NCAA rules, but are you looking to a next team next year? Are you planning that now? How is this looking? He's talking the big talk about getting teams coming every year, maybe multiple teams coming every year. Are you seeing any interest? Are you maybe the Florida coach? Like, how's it looking?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a ton of interest. It's I'm not at liberty to say who and when, but I mean, it was, I don't know how with the proper verbiage, but it was arguably the most impactful foreign tour in the history of college basketball. People talk about Kentucky. I've done all Kentucky stuff. this was a different animal. This was a, you're not laying on the beach and, going down water slides. Like, you're seeing where Jesus was born and where he died on the cross. You're being baptized. It's a different animal. And so other teams saw that. And so, yeah, I've had multiple teams reach out with legitimate great interest and wanting to get involved and wanting to come next year. So I do believe, we're going to have at least a couple of teams next summer.
I think. Oh, well, multiple teams. Okay. We see a lot of these teams go to the Bahamas. That's your special connection there. And we've seen several go to Canada, I believe. I think we've seen some go to Mexico and maybe Costa Rica too. A lot closer in Israel, and I think you've mentioned it a couple of times.
Well,
So I
they
can
go
bring
all
it.
over the world. It's not really even Canada or Costa Rica. I mean, this summer alone, I took LeBron James' kids to London, Paris, and Rome. We took Virginia to Italy. We took Michigan to Paris and Greece. We took Alabama to Barcelona and Paris. We took Ohio State to the Bahamas. I mean, we take teams all over the world. Like, teams are traveling all over the world, but no one's really gone to Israel.
Well, I
So
guess I'm
even
curious from Europe, and then you have your North America, Caribbean kind of thing.
right.
You've mentioned it before how expensive it can be to go to Israel. Is there any teams kind of like, oh, we're interested, and then you got to show them the price tag? Is that what's holding people back from doing things like Japan or Australia or I think you
Well,
mentioned
a lot of
Egypt,
teams
but
go to Australia. A
yeah.
lot of teams go to Australia. It's just, what's the coach's mission? How far do they want to go? What do they want out of it? Why go to a specific part of the world? I mean, every coach has such a different reason for doing what they do. Some coaches don't flinch at going to Australia. Others, they don't want to go. They want a direct flight into Canada or the Caribbean and, want something easy and go right back home. It's totally up to the coach.
Yeah, have you seen any interest? Bruce came to you wanting to do this Israel trip. It's very unique, and we know why Bruce wants to do it. Is there any other more out there, outside of Europe and North America? Maybe some coaches that want to go to Africa or South America. Are there
For
any
sure.
yeah, any you've had to turn down, or any that you're looking into right now? Any you would be
Yeah.
excited about? That man, we can't wait to do this one.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely been huge interest in Africa. COVID put a big,
Oh yeah, yeah.
you know, it, they obviously put a big riff on teams being able to go anywhere. Well, last summer we were the only company who really did a foreign tour. We took Indiana to the Bahamas. Like, with now that COVID is subsiding, it's opening back up. We had one team reach out wanting to do Africa and Israel.
Wow.
So it's going to catch steam, now that the world is opening back up. But with COVID, the world shut down. You couldn't really do anything for, our Virginia trip was 2 years, too late. We have a trip next summer in 23 that was supposed to be when COVID hit, and then they had to postpone it again this year due to the school, their legislation, their legality, blah, blah, blah. So they're going to do it next summer. So, I mean, we're getting stuff from all over the world, but obviously Israel is still an unbelievable trip that's still at the forefront of being so new.
Gotcha. Is there any interest? I thought this was very interesting. The college basketball sports getting so much more international. I believe Oscar Shibwe is from Ghana, maybe, or Nigeria. We have our own player on our team, Johan Traore, who's French. And we've spoken to some French people about it. I'm curious if any of these coaches are seeing this as an opportunity to bring their players abroad, but also get their name abroad. I don't know if there's some hotbeds. I mean, we've seen Lithuania be a hotbed for basketball. You see Nigeria be a hotbed for sports recruiting. Have you had any coaches reach out to you and say, not only do we want to travel abroad, we want to play some of these like high school academy teams or be involved in some of this stuff for more than just our team, but for recruiting in the future?
They don't want to play high school. They want to play national teams or select teams or pro teams. It's never high school teams.
Yeah.
And everything coaches do is purposeful. So whether it's Johan Traore, or Oscar Shibwe, whoever it is, we were in Paris with Michigan, and they had the Palestinian kid who his first introduction in Michigan basketball was showing up in Paris and being with the Michigan team. Every coach has a very well thought out purpose behind everything that they do. I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Any other teams you worked with you want to tell us about? I guess, now I think about one interesting one I wanted to ask you about. Oscar Shibwe, NIL deals. There's visa issues in America to where he couldn't do some of the NIL stuff he wanted to do in the
I'm not
United
going to go
States.
there. I'm not going to go there.
Okay. All right. So that was not, you were not involved in that stuff.
I'm not going to go there.
All right. Any other teams you want to tell us about that you've been involved with? I know people are very interested in Alabama and what they did over in Spain and Italy. There are rivals. Any other teams maybe we should know about?
No, I just really wanted to focus on coach and everything that Auburn did and why they were so incredible to work with and why the Auburn family and the fan base is so lucky to have a coach who embraces Auburn Nation and the family and the players and the coaches and just everything that Auburn represents and who he is. They're just he's a really, really special person. And, I can't say enough about the entire experience and what it did for college basketball, what it did for ESPN content, what it did for the players. I mean, the whole thing was just really, really unbelievable. And I just can't thank Coach enough for entrusting myself and my company and my partners with really putting together the trip and executing it. And all these people come out of the woodwork. We did this, we did that, the Jewish rabbi, all that, whatever, commenting. Bruce and I did this. And for Bruce to believe in us and really get this done was just beyond humbling. And he deserves more credit than he's ever been due.
We can agree with that. He's honestly always undercredited, in my opinion. But Lee, thanks for coming on. If there's anything else you want to say or anything, we've loved having you on. This is a very special interest for me that I get very into, and this is really cool to pick your brain on some of this stuff.
Yeah, no, I appreciate y'all having me, and just good luck to Auburn this year, and good luck to you guys with the podcast. But I really appreciate you reaching out.
Yeah, hopefully, I think we'll be hearing. We heard the reason I reached out originally was because we heard your name on the broadcast, and we've asked around. We have some friends in the Auburn basketball office, and we asked around people in Israel, who's the go-to person to talk about this stuff, and it was Lee Miller. So thanks again for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, guys. War
Talk
Eagle.
to y'all soon.